So this PS4 controller desperately needs a joystick replacement. The R2 trigger opens a lot wider. I suspect a piece of plastic that holds it in is cracked and broke off. So once again, just like the PS3 controller, you gotta give Sony credit for making this very easy. All you have to do is unscrew 4 screws, and these are not fancy screws, they're just a standard cross shape. So once you have the 4 screws removed, the handle is split into 2. So I kind of like to push down on the tip here to snap it open like that. Now there's going to be 2 hooks, one over here and one up here somewhere. I like to grab a pick and kind of just, well, that was actually really easy. So you kind of just have to pick in there to try to get the hook released. Turn the controller upside down. The bottom half here, which is now on top, you kind of have to lift and move away from the triggers. You have to push L and R2 like into the controller case. Just like that. Lift very slowly and carefully because there's a ribbon cable. All you have to do is grab the little blue plastic, pull it up like that, and very easily half of the controller. Here is the battery pack, and removing the battery pack is the easiest thing you can do. Just disconnect it here. It is possible in the future for these packs to start swelling and bumping up. It has the potential to split the controller open. One thing you have to watch out for, sometimes this piece of rubber can fall out. So on the back of the case, there's this little hole here where you can poke something in to hit the piece of rubber, and then the piece of rubber on the top here hits a reset button. This is where it goes. So here's the L2 trigger, and here's the R2 trigger. It bends weird. This piece of plastic's actually broken. It actually snapped off. Spring that goes on that piece, and the trigger should just pull right out. On one side, the axle snapped off. On eBay, I found someone selling third-party replacement parts for all the triggers. A recreated R2 trigger with both of the axles. One thing to look out for is that these triggers have this little black bar right here. And that black bar is what pushes up against the rubber pad here, probably 5 years old. Plastic bar starts to chew and eat away at the rubber. One day this might stop working. I don't know if you can buy replacement rubber pieces. If you could, it's really easy. You could just replace this piece of rubber. But if you can't, then yeah, you're kind of screwed. So now that I have my replacement trigger, first thing to do is put this spring into the side of the trigger like this. And then you have to line the spring up into this groove over here. Just like that. Snap the trigger down in place. Should work just as intended. The next step would be to remove the circuit board so we can get access to the joysticks. One black screw here. This entire circuit board is literally held down by just one screw. It's hard to get a grip, but once you do, you have to pull this ribbon cable out, and then you can lift the entire circuit board and reveal the joysticks. So you just have to be careful that you don't break the cables here attached to the rumble motors. The rest of the buttons are actually attached to this plastic board. So lift it up by grabbing the rumble motors. Entire circuit middle plastic tray piece, and then here you have the other half of the shell with the touchpad, which you can remove by spinning it like that. Be careful with these rubber pads because they're easy to rip. And then you can dump out all of the button keys. Be careful not to drop the share and option buttons. Here's the PlayStation home button, and then over here is the D-pad. The whole front shell of a PS4 controller. You can lift the circuit board and very easily pull the joysticks out. There's one. Slowly add more pressure. There's two. And if you're super advanced and need to replace the actual joystick module here, you can actually buy replacement modules. However, it's going to require you to desolder the module from behind the circuit board and then resolder it back on, and that's very advanced as I do not have a problem with the actual joystick modules. A bunch of replacement. Now these are third-party replacement heads. My plan this time is to use rubber pads, a protection rubber pad. Underneath the replacement joysticks, you can see it's the same. Just line the center up, and there we go. There we go. This is a really good chance to go and deep clean the controller, clean all of the buttons, and just get all that grime, dust, dirt, oil, sweat, and tears. And I like to give everything a quick clean, just like the way I brush my teeth, using a toothbrush and some Q-tips and toothpicks with some dish soap and floss and mouthwash. Just wash the rubber pads using your hands very gently because these are very easy to rip. So now that everything is clean, we can start putting it back together. Make sure these little holes here are punched through. Make sure that the plastic goes in between the pad and the ribbon cable and not on top of it like that. And then you just rotate it over and it just sits in place like that. So make sure all the ribbons here look flat and okay. Line up the joysticks to go into the holes and these plastic pillars to go through, and then just gently kind of let gravity do its thing and drop it in. You don't really want to force it down in any way because that means something's caught on something. It has to go in this little slot here. So once you get it lined up, I like to just with my finger push it in, and then you could feel it nice and snugly. Then we put the one screw to hold everything into place back in. And then once again, you could do a double test. Click the joysticks, click all the buttons. Make sure the share and option buttons have their nice click. Test out the triggers. Then now you could, if you have a replacement battery, just snap it back. Put the cables under a hook over here. And then just let the battery sit in its little bed. And then don't forget the little reset button rubber piece here. Press it down to make sure it clicks. And then put the ribbon cable for the charging port. Once again, just push it. Lock in nice and snug. Lock the triggers in first. Put the triggers through and make sure it snaps in the center here. The hardest part is getting these triggers. Could try playing with it a bit. And there, once you have the triggers in, then you can move down to the bottom and then snap the little hook at the sides. Snap the bottom in. So I like to just squeeze the controller all around to make sure everything is snapped in. Then while holding it tight to keep the two pieces together, do once again another button test. Make sure everything feels alright and clicks nicely. The triggers work, the battery works. The triggers have successfully been replaced with a new one. The joysticks have been replaced and look nice and new. And now the last thing to do is to just put all these screws back in. And remember to rotate the screw backwards until you can hear and feel a click. Just like that. It's a very subtle little click. It just means that the teeth of the screw have lined up with the groove on the plastic, and it should be very easy to put the screw back in because you do not want to force the screw into the plastic and create new threads, because that will eventually, over time, strip all the plastic and the screws will no longer work. And then now I just like to twist the controller a bit to see if any of the screws are not tight enough and a bit loose. This feels about right. And there you go, you have successfully replaced the battery, joysticks, triggers, gave it a nice deep clean. And now I would suggest using these rubber grip pads just to help protect the joysticks. Sweat and oils don't deteriorate the nice rubber grip here. It's a lot easier to just replace these rubber grips than it is to take apart the controller and replace the actual joysticks. This is the newer PS4 controller with the little light bar on top of the touchpad. A difference I noticed is the actual touchpad has this little cut out piece here for the light to shine through. The little ribbon circuit here is blue. The options and share buttons are actually attached to this plastic casing and are not separate. An extra pain is making sure that the little ribbon for the touchpad feeds through this plastic hole here. Just like that. The rumble motors have this extra stability plastic angle that goes into this support beam. The trigger plastic is actually gray and not completely black. It has this little hook here to stop it from fully popping out. And the spring actually mounts differently. It mounts upside down. So this trigger system looks a bit more complicated, but it looks to me like it's more structurally secure and looks to give a more solid operation. The reset button is no longer a separate piece of rubber, but it's actually a piece of plastic attached to the battery casing on top of the reset button. So when it's pressed down, it clicks the little reset. It still has the one screw to hold everything in place. Comes with the same type of battery with a similar hook for the battery cord. The battery mount and ribbon cable mount for the charging port is actually flipped, so it's on the opposite side on this new controller. And on the light bar charging port side, there's this new clear piece of plastic which allows for a single LED to light up both the rear and the top of the touchpad. So you carefully put the ribbon cable back into its slot. This piece of plastic in between the 1 and 2 triggers are no longer part of the bottom casing, so it should be a bit easier to snap on and remove the case. It's different enough that you can't swap the insides of the new and old controller, but still should be just as simple to fix or replace anything that needs to be done. Well, I hope the video was informative. I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed it. Give me a like, subscribe, and thanks for watching.